much for being a part of the show this morning. It is 7:30 here on Smooth 98.1 Smooth Breakfast with Ayo Mairo Ese.
And Valentine Ohu. Good morning.
This morning, it's time for us to go through the national news stories and with analysis, joined by analyst Uade. Good morning.
Good morning, Lagos. Good morning, Valentine. Good morning, Ayo.
Good morning, Wally.
I'm
Great to have you on the show.
wishing everyone a happy new year in advance.
And same to you. Now, Wade is at Rink Nigeria on Twitter if you'd like to follow him and also engage with him on social media. From us, we're at Smooth981 FM on Twitter. Use the hashtag freshlypressed981 to get your messages in and easily trackable.
All right, and on Twitter, I use at Smooth981 FM, of course. On YouTube, we're streaming live. You can send a message to WhatsApp 0809
All right, let's go on to our first story for this morning. It's from the Punch newspaper. Falana replies Malami, demands apology for Sowore and Dasuki. So, Ade, obviously, we haven't seen the end of the back and forth between the government and the council to Sowore and Sowore himself. Today, we're speaking about the head counsel, human rights lawyer, Mr. Femi Falana SAN, who yesterday responded to the statement made by the Attorney General of the Federation, Abubakar Malami, where he said that, where he made a few statements. I'll allow you to take us through these statements and what Falano's response was.
I think I agree with Falana on the request. Because when you read the statements, you would wonder. The minister had said the only reason for the release of Sowore and Dasuki revolved around their commitment to the rule of law, obedience to court orders, and compassionate grounds. And I don't know when it became the forte of the Attorney General to release people on compassionate grounds. That forte belongs to the president of the country, and you only release people on compassionate grounds for convictions, not people who are still going through trials, and you are detaining them despite several court orders for bail that had been refused. So it just goes to, for me, I really don't know what the Attorney General was thinking when he said that. It might, for me, I think it might have just been better for him to say, "Oh, we've released them. We've looked at all the things, and there are still additional charges, but would obey the rule of law and move on." Compassionate grounds is, for me, is really not is not the story at all.
Well, here's a direct quote from him following an interview when he was quoted by his spokesman, Dr. Umar Gwandu, having spoken to BBC Hausa and the Hausa service of the Voice of America. He said this. He said that the only reasons for the release of Omoyele Sowore and Sambo Dasuki revolved around our commitment to the rule of law, obedience to court orders, and compassionate grounds. So it wasn't only compassionate grounds he mentioned.
Yeah, but my point is, you didn't have to mention compassionate grounds because you don't have the authority to release a detainee on compassionate grounds. He's not a convict. The forte of compassionate grounds release belongs to the executives, either the president or the state governors. Yes, obeying the rule of law and telling us that, oh, we had gone through all the things that had gone on. The new charges will be brought against the man, and we're obeying the rule of law and granting him his bail and releasing him based on his bail conditions. And that makes more sense. That compassionate grounds really does, for me, doesn't warrant that. Also, even in the story, you would find out that like Falano said, he said, with profound respect, you have no power to release and detain defendants from custody on compassionate grounds. As you are no doubt aware, only the president and state governors are entitled to exercise that prerogative of mercy of release or release of any convicted persons on compassionate grounds, and that's what the Constitution states.
All right, thank you, Ade. Just mentioned, we hope that we would watch out to see if indeed Falana will receive this apology he's demanded from the Attorney General of the Federation.
And MI from Akoka said, true, the AGF has no such powers, but because the lines have been blurred, some individuals seem to have usurped the duties of recognized institutions. Must you talk? Sometimes be quiet and keep it moving, is what MI says. Thank you very much, MI.
All right, thanks, MI. Let's move on to our next story here. Still on the Attorney General of the Federation speaking, he's made another comment, this time with regards to the Islamic movement of Nigeria and El-Zakzaky, the release of their leader, Sheikh Ibrahim El-Zakzaky. He's mentioned that detaining, well, his release was not dependent on the federal government, but the Kaduna state government. What do you have to say about this?
This is
Wade?
another, like the first statement he made. This is another disappointing statement from the AGF. It's amazing that someone who was arrested by the army, handed over to the DSS, all of a sudden becomes the prerogative of the state government. If he was the state government, then transfer him to the Kaduna State Police and let them carry out the investigation. Let's stop making statements in this country to justify a position that is wrong every time. You know, they've gone, according to the news, they've gone to the Kaduna State High Court. The Federal High Court is the court that gave the jurisdiction for the DSS to detain this man. The Kaduna State High Court, where they brought the proceedings for a number of other issues, had thrown out the case, according to the statement. So why do you now say the prerogative is that of the Kaduna state government when they are not the ones who are prosecuting the case itself? I think the Attorney General should, he should be more cautious about his statements and the way he makes his statement. If you release, and a lot of all these people have been held based on security threats. So if you release Sowore and Dasuki on compassionate grounds, why don't you release this man too on compassionate grounds?
Apart from, beyond compassionate grounds, so that we're not just mentioning
even
that.
The courts have granted him bail.
Yes, if they said they released him on commitment to the rule of law and obedience to court orders, the outstanding court orders that haven't been obeyed. So we're hoping that based on his earlier statements with regards to the Sowore case, he would also apply this to other cases such as this, where the rule of law has been given. All right, thank you very much. Move on to our next story here. Critic of Niger governor sent to prison for intentional insult. This is a very interesting story, Uade. When I read the title or the headline from the Premium Times, I assumed that he had been taken to prison because he had said something or he had criticized the governor of Niger State. However, this is not the case. It's a roundabout way, but speculations are stating that it's because he's actually a critic of the governor. That's why something else he's done has been traced to that. Please, can you take us to the story?
This is a very interesting story. Well, according to the police, in line they took Mr. Kacha to court in line with section 399 of the penal code. What is strange, if I pick up the phone and I call Ayo and I insult Ayo and Ayo reports me to the police, and 5 days later they ask me to come and make a statement, and in getting there they take me directly to the court, and then you charge me for insults. What's the investigation? For me, there are always two sides to the story.
Yes.
And did you hear the side of Mr. Kacha before you drove him directly to the magistrate court and said, oh, and this is on Christmas Eve, so yes. And the judge has remanded him in custody till January 6th. But the other issue here is, like you said, the roundabout way that everybody seems to be talking about of criticizing the governor of the state. And this is a precedent that has now been set, and it was started by the federal government. When you detain people for speaking their minds and you say it's a treasonable offense,
In this case, he's been one of the biggest arguments of this particular story is when intentional insult became a criminal offense, where he's now been taken to prison.
Well, according to the police, according to Penal Code Section 399, it's an intentional insult. It's an offense. However, what investigations were carried out? So you make a report, so you need to hear my own side of the story before you now carry out your proper investigations. And some of these calls, was the call actually placed? You could have found this out. Did they check all these things before you invited the man and you drove him straight to the magistrate court to present him to the judge? Also, some of the things that have been said is some of the statements the man has made on his Facebook, what's it called, in terms of the affairs of the state. And it's just amazing the times we're living in today, where technically we're being shut down from our freedom of speech.
If we can be objective about this, how about we start going the route of signing class actions against certain individuals if we feel the need to seek redress. People who probably we feel like we have substantial evidence to prove that they're corrupt or siphoning government funds? How about signing class action and going the legal route instead of just
Just
resorting to social media insults and
and
abuse?
that's another route that we can look at. When like if we go down further in the
Which do you
story,
think is more effective?
you have to use both at every particular point in time. It is important that you go through the rule of law. That way, it sets the precedence. Even if it goes to court and the case is
You know why
strong.
I asked this question? Each option has a certain list of tools that
Yeah.
you can use, right? Social media, you put out this information, verified or not verified. We know that in the world we live in right now, very few people would even go the length of
Of
verifying
verifying the
or providing evidence. But if you go through the legal routes, the investigations that will be carried out, it is hoped that that will bring up desired results, whichever favor it falls
it
on.
falls in.
But at least construct. So that's why that's on that premise. I'm asking which is more effective.
I think the
Insulting
legal.
somebody on social media or
I think
seeking
what
an
you
investigation.
seeking an investigation and a proper regress through the legal process is more effective. Why? Because you would have to provide enough evidence for that investigation to be carried out, and those evidence will be substantiated or will be checked upon and be substantiated by the investigating authority. And that's a good point that you raised. But also, like I said, if you have these documents or you have these things and they are verifiable, then you can also go the route of social media, but not, like they say, not fake news
Yes.
as the case may
I think
be.
it's important for us to differentiate what is just an insult, which is considered slander or libel in the case where it's written,
Yeah.
to you expressing your views as a citizen. Because sometimes when you talk about the rule of law, the first two stories we've taken have talked about how the federal government have flouted the rule of law, and so there's a general lack of trust in the process of the law. So people feel that one of the ways in which they can express themselves is through through the power of social media. And recently we have seen that social media is powerful because people pay attention when you publish something because they don't want any embarrassment to their office.
Yeah, but it's just the last thing. But you see, like I said, like I continue to say, when you go through the rule of law, you set the precedence
Yes.
and it stays. So if you get a judgment from the court, tomorrow someone is going to refer to that judgment
Exactly.
in terms
It's
of
on record.
it's on record. So it's important that many times we go through that process, and
Yes.
many things have happened in the past that some of these things have been brought to today to use to decide cases in courts.
Absolutely.
All right, we have a few messages to go through. Yinka sent in this one. It says, when you politicize the office of the AGF, this is what you get. An AGF that acts like he didn't attend law school. When he said they obey the rule of law and court orders, how many has the administration he works for obeyed? That's a question from Yinka. Emeka Onelum from Amo says, I'm just imagining if the hate speech bill is passed, at least we're already having a taste of how it will be abused if passed. Thank you, Emeka.
All right, thanks. There's still the issue of Agba Jalingo. We mustn't forget that. And he's still in prison. He's still in detention. All right, let's move on to our next story from the Vanguard newspaper. Only verified constituency projects will attract payments, says the federal government. We have had releases in recent times, Uade, of moves and policies from the federal government with ways to make their financial transactions more transparent. This is another move, and we have here that the president had stated earlier on that 1 trillion naira has been lost in the past 10 years to constituency projects without much evidence to prove that amount. So what they're saying now is that before payment is made from the treasury, they must verify that constituency projects are for real. Please take us to this.
One of the first things I said when I was noting down things is, thank God they're finally waking up. But reading through the story, and I think we spoke about this about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we said it's not just about monitoring; it's actually the full process of the constituency um, project management. For me, where you do not carry the local governments along, and you're going to do constituency projects based on senators or House of Representatives, then it calls for non-transparency and monies can get missing at any point in time. So the process for me in monitoring is just one part. The process for actually carrying out these projects has not been fully defined, and a lot of money is going to be spent on this monitoring project, which I agree it's important so that you can verify those payments. But when you go through through the amount of monies that will be spent on monitoring, which comes to about 1.1 billion, of which about 50% will be on research and development. So
Yes.
my question here is, what research and development are you carrying out for
Thank you.
monitoring?
Yeah.
That's one. You're going to spend like another 25% on travels. You are going to spend another like 20% on buying new cars. Are we going to be buying new cars for monitoring every year, and so on and so forth? So a number of things still needs to be questioned in terms of the process. Let these things run, set out these projects, run them through the local governments,
Yeah.
and then you have monitoring teams that go through
I have
them.
a question though. We have talked about in terms of us practicing true federalism and how involved the federal government is in states. Now they're going down to local government. Would you not say that is this the responsibility of the federal government? Should they be the ones having to verify? Because we operate a full democracy and the federal system where we have the different arms of government. We have the Senate, we have the federal, and the judiciary. Should they be so involved in constituency projects? Is that not is that not for the senators?
It is for the senators. However, this money is coming from the federal budget. So we need to be sure that these things are being done and before you make those payments. But my point continues to remain is it doesn't pass through the local governments. So a senator comes and I give a typical example. Last week I was somewhere and they had put up street lights on the street. It's a small street, but they had put up street lights and they're putting up street lights all over the place. Contracts have been issued from the representative in that area, the national representative. The local governments were not aware.
That's exactly that's what I'm trying to. Also, would it not be like so? If I don't like you, this is hypothetical, and because that remember what happened with PDP and APC, where the federal government would withdraw allocation to the state when they were not in agreement. If you're taking it down all the way to the Senate, that's holding their arm, and the Senate is supposed to be independent, such that they can hold the federal, hold the executive to account. If you're saying that you withdraw constituency project money from them based on whether it's verified or not, there's an issue right there because you're not releasing funds to them.
And I agree with
But
that.
I do not necessarily think that they want to withdraw. That's the intention.
No, I'm
I
not
think
saying
the
they want
intention
to
is for
withdraw.
accountability.
Accountability.
If you've been given X amount of money
Let's see how much. Let's see how you use it.
projects. Show us
What has been done for, and let's see those projects.
I don't doubt that it's for accountability. What I'm asking is who should be holding who to account? Why should it be the federal government? And that's a conversation that we should start to have.
The federal government.
Who should hold the senators then?
The people. The people who elected them. So in terms of being independent, the reason I'm bringing this up is also with regards to the funding of the judiciary and why they have said they cannot be one of the challenges of them being independent. Because as long as the money is coming from them, it is difficult for you to be independent.
Yeah, the monies come through the Senate. The monies are allocated through the Senate.
Yes.
They would carry out this constituency project, but we need to be sure that these projects have been carried out. So an independent monitoring team from the federal government is fine.
If it's independent, fine. What I'm saying is that as long as they don't have control over it, because if the federal government has a say in how it's being spent, there'll be a problem.
No, that's not what it is.
Malami here says on WhatsApp, constituency project is a fraud. Instead of spending more of our money to monitor a fraud, we should scrap it completely. Let the state and local governments work. That's from Dami. Ifeanyi Qualisa from IBA says, I'm one who does not believe in this constituency project thing. Is it in the constitution? All right, let's move on to our next story. Why Nigerians may be poorer in 2020 by manufacturers. From the Guardian newspaper, Uade, the Manufacturers Association of Nigeria, they are, well, even the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, a few of them have expressed displeasure at the trend of the economic moves or policies that have been implemented, or some of them that have been mulled to start to the 1st of January. Including the tax issue. You said many of those things, including the partial border closure, is affecting the economy. It wouldn't be better in the next year.
And I tend to agree with them. Remember that the World Bank released the report about 2 or 3 weeks ago saying the same thing. The expected growth rate in Nigeria is expected to be between 2.1 and 2.5, which is in comparison to the last 10 years is abysmal, where we've been doing growth rates of between 5 and 7%. So it's and then you're bringing in additional charges to the common man. VAT is going to go up. Bank transfer charges have increased with the stamp duties and so on. So inflation is rising every day. So you find out that the Lagos State Chamber of Commerce is looking at the outlook, and also with the border closures, locally produced goods cannot go out the way they are meant with enough ease.
But they can. It's just the regulations are tighter now, and really trying to put the acts together to check the inflows and outflows. Because if we are talking about border closure or partial closure affecting export of goods, don't forget we beyond land borders we still have sea borders. Goods are transported that way.
And I agree, but to even get through the ports is a menace. So that's one. And then you have freight. And yes, they are putting their regulations together and making it tighter and better for us to send out goods without them being smuggled out and the exact duties being paid on them. But like I said, it's a lot of the transactions that go on between Nigeria and just the west coast of Africa is mainly by road, because it's the cheapest form of transport. Even with the bad roads also, it calls for it causes a delay in delivery and a number of things.
Let me ask you this. So you see how the trend has been this year, last year, in fact from 2016 till now. There's been a lot of hardship from inflation to affecting the exchange rates, and down to now. We're becoming more vocal through the the advance of social media and everything, and we're complaining a lot about things that we can complain about, and it gets to the ears of the federal government. If they decide to put in these policies, first question is, do you think they are necessary for growth, for Nigeria to see the significant, at least a little percentage of significant growth that we're aiming to achieve? That's one. Two, you see all these policies being implemented and the progress that's been made. Do you think it's a necessary pain that Nigerians should experience at this time, seeing that all these policies are all almost coming together at once?
Okay, the first thing, a number of the policies I do agree with would make us better. One of the things a lot of Nigerians have done over the last 4-5 years is start to rethink the way they do things. It's no longer business as usual of money comes and it just goes. So people are more prudent, people are more patient, people are willing to ensure that they do to a large extent the right things towards getting the things that they need to do. In terms of when it is coming, should they all come at once, or should they be systematically put in place to ensure?
Are they necessary? All of them to happen now if we are going to achieve what we stand to achieve in the next 10 years?
I believe that they are necessary over the period of this tenure of this administration, so that we can go back. Because one of the things I've realized is that a lot of Nigerians have started thinking outside the box, rather than business as usual. I just wake up tomorrow and say, Valentine sells shirts, so I just import the shirts and everybody sells shirts. But we're becoming more ingenious in the way we think, and it's good, because it's not from difficulties or challenges makes you more innovative. And so the rate at which they are coming is where the question is. Why? Because the stimulating effect from the federal government in terms of spending to boost the economy is not there, and what they are spending on.
Yes.
And that's where the real question is.
The reason why I wanted to direct the conversation that way is because I'm hoping that, or I want Nigerians to really think about the reactions, the statements put out, some knocking the policies, some supporting it, to try to separate partisanship from objectivity. So, I mean, if you can now say, regardless of who is in power right now, regardless of the length of the tenure, are we doing the right things? Are they going to give us the desired results? All these kind of questions.
Yeah, they should give us the desired results in the long run.
All right.
And they should.
Right, so Ifeanyi says on WhatsApp, bad economy policy is tantamount to bad economy and a spike in poverty level of the people. And then he says land border closure is an admission by the federal government that customs have failed in their responsibility,
Yeah.
as most smuggling before goes through the official borders, at least from what we hear.
Thank you.
All right, then Okoyemi Praise says that the Senate does not have any business implementing projects in the first place. Only the executive arms should be doing that. A lot of agents of government have usurped the responsibilities of local government to themselves, and we must be careful.
And that's true. This the newspaper has this report. The Federal Inland Revenue Service yesterday announced a new tax clearance certificate regime. It's been problematic getting the TCC documents lately. People have been complaining, business have been affected. We know some of the things, some of the benefits or needs for these TCC documents is to renew contracts, to get approval for vendors to make supplies to certain multinationals. But what are your thoughts regarding the new tax window or clearance window?
I I think it's best for a lot of businesses, because what has happened over time, despite the fact that the FIRS has created your self-assessment portals that you can easily use to ensure that you get your tax clearance.
Do they work?
Well, at the point in time they were working, that I know, because while I was still in paid employment, we used it quite a number of times. But the challenge was, now you do those self-assessments. What should technically happen is, based on your self-assessments, you should be able to get your TCC within a window.
Yeah.
I think it was between 15 to 45 days. But like all things, backlog has set in, because some of these things you just need to check them and say, okay, this guy has presented it in the right manner. Let's issue this TCC, so that when we do our own independent verification, if there are additional taxes, then we would if they've paid more, then we'll give them a tax credit. And that's what this is trying to address, to ensure that businesses, individuals who need to present information for the year to do business by the end of January, can receive their tax clearance certificates. And this is a brilliant idea if it does work well.
Yes, I get that. But as the chairman, Mr. Mohamed Nami, announced for this tax 30-day window, I mean, what difference does it make? Is it going to speed up the process now, or give some waivers to liens that would have been placed on certain accounts? What does this really mean? Because you're telling me you have a 30-day window. 30-day window to what? What's going to be more straightforward now?
So one of the things the first thing, let me just explain a bit of the financial aspects of it. So a lot of businesses have their year end at the 31st of December, and your tax tax liability is computed based on that year end for the next year.
So based on
tax year, yeah. So based on preceding year basis. So now what happens? What he's saying is that if it ends on the 31st and you do your best of judgment, by the 30th you should have that. So for companies who already have their information, their accounts are audited and all, can quickly do this, and by January 30th or January 31st, you get your tax clearance. And as you go on subsequently, if you don't do that on time, then you will be at fault. And that's what I see.
Like an extension of time.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Right, Dami says they will spend 40 billion on renovation and then another 100 billion on fictitious projects. The role of the legislative arm is lawmaking. If they see a gap in project implementation, they should make laws to cause a change and use their oversight roles to ensure enforcement of the laws. This government just confirmed it is not different from the previous party by endorsing this road.
And Ifeanyi Police from IBA says, tax certificates. To even pay tax in Lagos is a nightmare, as almost all the banks turn you back if you want to pay tax on account of bad network. Interesting. The Punch newspaper has this next headline I will touch very briefly. The Socio-Economic Rights and Accountability Project, in collaboration with Budge IT, Enough is Enough, of about 583 concerned Nigerians, have asked the Federal High Court in Abuja to stop the proposed renovation of the National Assembly Complex in Abuja that's touted to cost about 37 billion naira to renovate. Chasing the health budget for the whole year.
We spoke about this now, about class action, and this is what this is all about. And if the court does agree to this, it would set a precedent, and it's better, even when you publicize it on social media, because you have a court backing on it, and next time when this kind of things happen, people can easily walk into a chambers and prepare their case and go to court and say based on precedents. And that's one of the great things about legal precedents.
Yes, and they've asked that the court grants them this on the basis until an assessment of the impact of spending on critical sectors like education, health, clean water, and safe roads is carried out.
And I agree with them totally.
All right, thank you so much, Uade. We thank you for coming here with us this morning. And again, a happy new year to you in advance. I think the next time you'll be behind the mic would be in 2020.
Yes. A new decade.
A new decade. All right, Lagos, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation. To all those who sent in comments and text messages, we're grateful. Unfortunately, we couldn't go through all of them. But please, let's keep this conversation going on Twitter at Smooth981FM using the hashtag FreshlyPressed981. Also
Happy
follow
New Year
at Reinc Nigeria. In 15 minutes, Tega will be here with the Locker Room 981.